Welcome to the Candidly Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Luke Burke, and today my guest is Miss Ebony Clipper, and we're going to be talking about mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so I really wanted to take the time and take this opportunity to sit down with you all to help you get more comfortable with the idea of maybe seeing therapy or talking to someone about what you have going on. So, Miss Ebony, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on. We had some technology difficulties and we're finally starting.
We're
So
good.
we're good. I'm really excited about that. So as I
Hmm.
said in my opening, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and a lot of people don't really know what that really means. It's becoming a more popular term, but a
Yeah.
lot of people still really don't know what mental health awareness is. So before we dive too deep into the interview, can you give us an idea of what is mental health? What does that even mean?
So I think, thankfully, times have changed as we talk and have this conversation, this dialogue about mental health and diagnoses and things of that nature. So the basic form of it is mental health refers to the mind, how the mind processes things, how the mind can create things, how the mind, which is the most powerful part of our body, can control our emotions, our thoughts, just how we operate in the world. So when we talk about mental health, it's just really a state of being. It's normal. It's depression, anxiety. We can run down the list of things. And I think right now that I'm so thankful there is a month for that because it's not a secret anymore. You know what I mean? It's something that a lot of people have. But it's just this much of them. You know what I mean? It's not the whole 100% being. So when we talk about mental health, we just talk about how we operate in the world, how we show up in the world, how brain chemistry is a thing, how certain disorders are, hereditary, or just things are different with each and every one of us. And that's okay. So I think it's great that we're at a place, today in 2022 where we have a month, we can talk about it and we can see that it's not anything to be ashamed of.
Correct, and I agree with you 100%. And so one of the things I forgot to do, let me kind of go back and let the people know that you're certified in this, and you're not just some random person talking about mental health. So
Yeah.
Ebony is a licensed clinical professional counselor. She emphasizes working with children, adolescents, and adults. Um, so she is certified, guys. So don't think I just have someone on here that's just just talking about mental health. But I'm looking at your bio, and I do want to kind of go over some things in your bio. Instead of reading the bio, I just kind of want to hit some highlights in here that I think are very important. So one of the things that you say in your bio is, provide a safe, warm, culturally competent. What does culturally competent mean?
So I think it can mean a lot of things to different, professionals and therapists. And so basically, it's you being able to sit across from somebody who, one, doesn't look like you, may not have the same background as you, the same upbringing as you, the same, just ethnicity or just religious cultures, things of that nature. So it's being open. It's being aware that we have differences. And even if we look the same, if we have the same gender or not, we can still recognize, how culture is so important when providing a service, because I might believe or see things in a way that you might not see or believe things. And that could be because of upbringing, that could be because of religious upbringing, just how we um, are nurtured in the world.
Okay. Okay. No, that makes sense. And another piece of your bio, you talk about your bio talks about you incorporating cognitive behavioral techniques. Now, I'm familiar with the term cognitive behavioral therapy. So,
Yep.
can you give us some examples of cognitive behavioral techniques? Like, what is that? Or not even examples, just what does that mean?
So I think a lot of people think of like CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy as like the thing. That's what every therapist does, and that's not 100% true, but it's also not 100% false.
Okay.
So basically, with CBT, it's just really understanding the connection between the mind, how thoughts and emotions and reactions to certain things are all connected,
Hmm.
right? So it works for a lot of different diagnoses, and some people love it and some people don't. So if we're working with someone who has anxious thoughts or, is riddled with anxiety, we can learn how to kind of understand the thought process to catch the thought to see what those triggers are. We're also able to incorporate techniques such as like journaling and being put in situations that might provoke certain old responses where we can start using some reframing so we can start using some different types of techniques. I love using CBT because for every client, sometimes the techniques are different, but they still kind of follow the same path. And so, really, it's just about understanding what those, I guess you can call them activating thoughts are, that activating event, and how we can kind of put some things in place to, change the way that we respond or the way that we feel it. And even taking it a step further, I'm always teaching my clients about the mind body connection because those two things are so important because we can have a thought and we can have a feeling.
Hmm.
Sometimes we don't put those two things together. And so sometimes when we have anxious thoughts or negative thoughts, it can provoke a feeling. And feelings are real. We feel it. So therefore, sometimes we think the thought, which is anxious or negative, or once we really get into it, can be false. It takes time to understand that. So once we feel something, we believe it. I
Hmm.
felt it. Of course I felt it because I thought it.
Right.
And so it's trying to undo some of those things.
Hmm.
That's all. And really just journaling. I'm huge on journaling because sometimes I tell my clients, we have to make space
Yeah.
in our brain. We have to make space, but we're so used to just go, 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 right? So I'm going, 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 got thoughts going, going, going. How do I take a step back? Sometimes we're not taught to do that. And it makes sense because we've got to go. We got things to do. I don't have time to think about that.
Right.
I don't have time to worry about that. I don't have time to feel that feeling because we don't like to feel certain things either.
Hmm.
That's just all people, mental health aside.
Yeah.
But sometimes certain people can feel things so heavily. Certain people can think things so heavily, and they can have so many thoughts that if you try to use some positive self talk
Hmm.
with your own inner voice, when you already have all that negative stuff, all that anxious stuff, you using your inner voice that's positive is going to be very soft.
Hmm.
Whereas this,
Right.
you can't even catch it,
Hmm.
right? Because one, it's a new thing that we're trying to do. So I always tell people, say things out loud,
Yeah.
write the thing down, walk away from it, come back to it just to see where you were at 5 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, an hour ago, 3 days ago,
Hmm.
just so you can see. Because sometimes we don't see the things, right?
Right.
We think it, but we don't. It's more. I won't say it's harder to put things on paper, but the way that I work and use CBT is like when we put the things on paper, we can actually see it for what it is.
Yeah.
You
And
know what I mean?
I do, and it sounds like, you know, it's really about being conscious of what's going on. We're talking
Hmm.
about cognitive, and it's about just being aware and being conscious because you mentioned something that I thought was really key, talking about our brains. Because some days I feel like I literally need to move stuff out of my brain. Like it's almost to the point to where it feels physically that I need to move. And I used to work in data, like database work, and it
Yeah.
feels like that. I have stuff in my database that needs to be downloaded and removed. And this is anybody that knows me know I always have like either a movie reference or a cartoon reference. And my cartoon reference for this example is SpongeBob. Actually,
Okay.
there there's a SpongeBob episode, and people are gonna laugh at me for this, but there's a SpongeBob episode where he trained himself completely because his boss, Mr. Krabs, was like, "I'm trying to do an upscale restaurant. I need you to be the best server and everything." So he literally dumped his entire brain out of everything, and the only thing he knew was the server, the server stuff that he learned how to be a professional server.
Mm.
Well, he was so good at it. At the end of this customer's sitting, they were like, "That was wonderful. That was great, son." And he was like, "What is your name?" He's like, "What is your name?" And he could not think of his name. So they cut to a scene where there's like a bunch of SpongeBob's in his head
Seen
running
this episode.
around trying to find his
They're
name.
burning stuff, and then I've seen it. I've seen
Yes,
it.
they're trying to find. So I literally feel
Yeah.
like that in my brain. Like there's so much stuff that I needed to get out of my brain. It's just so much stuff. But saying that, I kind of want to segue from that into this. Speaking of stuff that's on our brain and on our hearts and on our minds all the time, the mind-body connection, which really works well in fitness as well. Um,
Mhm.
Recently there was the shooting. I read an article before we got on about they were saying the numbers are a little sketchy, but the last number I saw was 19.
Yeah.
Um, the hard part about this is I believe that it takes, well, not I believe, I know it takes a mental toll on number one, the families that are impacted by this, because one day you send your kid off to school and then they
Mhm.
don't come back home. A very similar thing happened to my sister, except it wasn't in a mass shooting. It was my nephew who, someone came into the house. And that morning, my sister never left thinking that anything like that would happen. So that's traumatic for her. That's traumatic for the entire family, as opposed to my dad, who was 70 years old. He was in the hospital and we kind of knew. Then he was coming back, like, okay, maybe he'll come home. But then there got to a point where, like, okay, we kind of know what's going to happen here. We need to brace ourselves. So can you talk a little bit about that psychological, I mean, just that impact of such trauma? Because I want to give a moment to kind of talk about this, because it's so it happens so much in our society now, where I mean we had the Sandy Hook, which was I think 26 victims. You had the thing in Vegas, it was like 50 some victims. Then you go all the way back to 9/11, 3,000 or so victims. What is the mental toll, outside of the obvious, a family member losing someone, but what is the mental toll that it takes on an individual and the entire country as we constantly go through this?
It's it's hard to say, but it's not hard to say because people's capacity to endure, to see things, and even lack of capacity to endure and to see things, being involved or witnessing a shooting
Mm.
or mass destruction. You know, I think we know some of the words to use, which is, scary and or fearful, and there's anger. I think there's confusion, there's sadness. There's so many questions. Why? Why? Why did this happen? How come? Um, and I think it's just for the individual. It's hard to say. I can only speak from a personal stance, and everyone feels things and takes things on differently. But it's the word that comes to my brain is it's shock. It's shock and why. And so when you have people who witness these things, they have to somehow, hopefully, maybe one day, try and make sense of this.
Mm.
And and we can say that just in dialogue and conversation, but we know that it takes time because trauma is real. PTSD, post traumatic stress, is real. Um, Acute stress disorder is real.
Mm.
And I think sometimes it's just that shock and our bodies kind of go. So we can just keep going and moving, or we can get numb, or we can be angry. You know what I mean? We can even talk about losing a loved one. The words we use are going to be similar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just going to the example of, like, of a father being sick in the hospital, then coming back, we can, we know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it does happen, but we still feel
Yeah.
those things, right? We still feel those things in waves. And I think with the tragedy that just happened, even in Buffalo,
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
shock of it all, the denial of it all, those families are going to, I hope there's supports, so much support in place.
Mm.
And I tell people when they go through things, go through it.
Yeah.
Go through it. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where we're just so used to go, go, go. Because we don't like to sit with things that don't feel good as people. Most people don't like to be sad.
Right.
Most people don't like to be angry. I don't like to be sad. I don't like to be angry at all.
Yeah.
But I know I'm human.
Mm.
And it's easy to say that now, right? It's easy to be like, oh yeah, if you want to be sad, be sad. And I preface this with easier said than done, but we know right now in dialogue, if we kind of go through those motions and we have the right supports in place, a lot of good work can be done. And I can't imagine being, because I'm 37, I'll be 38 in September.
Okay.
And I can't imagine being in fourth grade, witnessing and going through what those children went through. I can't comprehend that because
Yeah.
I'm way past that, age. And it's little bodies and big feelings at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
Little bodies and big feelings, and they're trying to make sense of it.
Hmm.
I encourage parents whose kids have been through anything or have witnessed anything. We can talk about even, inner city violence and,
Right.
war torn countries. I mean,
Hmm.
the level of response, the level of the things that kids see in this day and age, which is just bizarre to me.
Yeah.
I, be with them, talk to them, and ask questions and just talk to them. And I say, get them as much support as possible and as soon, because some things take a while to come out.
Yeah, and that the support thing really hits home for me because my support during when my dad passed came from, I wouldn't say a weird source, but it was not a planned source. So one of my best friends, we were talking about it on the phone, and he lost his dad, and it was really bothering me to see my dad in the way that I was knew that I was going to see him,
Mm-hmm.
and so that day, that Thursday, I was or Wednesday, I was like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna go see him. I'll just wait. He probably don't want me to see him like this. I don't want to see him like this. And then I talked to my friend, and I talked to some other people, and but his was the most impactful. But I talked to some other people, and the biggest regret that I've heard was that either by force or by or something out of their control or something in their control, they weren't able to see their loved one in those last moments.
Mm-hmm.
And now, after talking to my friend, that support system, I was able to go see my dad on that Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, looking back now, I can't imagine not having to have gone down there and seeing him. But to your point, that support system of my friend was so important because if I didn't have him there encouraging me, I wouldn't have I would have not gotten closure for the rest of my life about not seeing my dad, who was mentally sharp at the time. His just bodies just gave out on him,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, that support system I think is great. So with that being said, um, I guess I want to kind of dive into helping people maybe get through this point. We talked about the trauma, and let me say this as well, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree. We don't
Okay.
have to experience trauma to seek therapy. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I would agree 100%.
Okay. Okay.
100%. Um, I think maybe, and you can, also tell me if this is what you've heard or, believe as well. But I think there's this notion when it comes to therapy that something bad has to be happening,
Right.
like something terrible and just out of your control, and everything's bleak and there's no way out. Are there clients like that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there are clients who seek therapy because they're having relationship issues, they're having job stress, they just want someone to talk to who they don't know because they know that I'm a stranger at
Yeah.
the end of the day. I don't know you, you don't know me, and my job isn't to give you advice.
Right.
Um, so, are there varying reasons why people seek therapy? Yeah, you can go to therapy for anything. I've had clients say, I just want to talk.
Yeah. Right.
And I said, great. And that's all they need.
Yeah.
You meet people where they're at. And I think there's this idea where, I think we have an idea about therapy where it's like the couch,
Yep.
like a very Freudian type of experience. And you're laying on the couch and the person's there with their notepad and
Right.
analyzing, psychoanalyzing you and stuff like that. And there's therapists who do that. And I think it's great.
Hmm.
But I think that sometimes is the thought that it's like I'm going to be telling people all my stuff and they're going to think I'm crazy and try to put me in the hospital and all this stuff. And it's like, it's not always, that's not the case. Some
Right.
people just need someone to talk to.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and that made me also think. So, how do you feel about? And then we'll get into the questions. This is just so interesting to me. So, how do you feel about? I had this conversation maybe 2 years ago with another LCPC, and we were I brought up the point, and I understood her point. I brought up the point that now it feels almost, I don't know if taboo is the word, but it almost feels cliche. Or you see a lot of influencers, a lot of people, hey, I get therapy every day, I get therapy every month, I get it, I go every week, once a week. This is, you know and I don't have a problem with that.
Mhm.
I just because I think it's good that people are able to talk about that they're seeing therapy. I just don't know if I it just seems sometimes that people are using it like as clout. Like, hey, I go see a therapist. Do you? Like, type of thing. How do you feel like that's happening a lot, or do you feel like that's a great thing for no matter how it's delivered that people are talking about, going through therapy?
I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword, though. Like, it's a great thing
Yeah.
we're talking about it. It's a great thing that it's out there. It's normalized. It's not a big hush hush secret.
Right.
But then on the other flip side of that, it's like, look at me. I see my therapist 3 times a week. What are you doing with your life? Oh my God.
Right.
It's like, but maybe I'm just okay. Like,
Yeah. Right.
maybe I don't need to see one. I mean, and that's perfectly fine. Some people don't have to see one. Double-edged sword. Double-edged sword. I mean, what did they say in Hollywood back in the day? All press is good press or
Oh
something like
yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's
You know
that's
what I
that's
mean?
the saying. Yeah. No press is bad press, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So if people are talking about it and people can see through the cloud, see through the smoke and mirrors that some of these influencers may or may not do, but
Hmm.
if they can see through that and be like, oh, wait, like it's okay
Yeah.
to seek help and I don't want to say suffer, but I don't have to do this by myself, you
Right.
know? That's the biggest thing about therapy. It's like you don't have to do it alone. Like there's
Mm.
outlets for people.
Oh, that's good. So another thing I notice that I hear from people a lot is the saying that I don't want someone telling me how I feel. And every time I hear that, I understand where the person is coming from, but I'm like, no, they're not trying to tell you how to feel. They're trying to help you process how you feel so that you can kind of come to the realization or come to your own understanding of how you it's kind of like helping you organize your thoughts and things like that. How would you respond to someone who says, well, I don't want to go to a therapist because they're just trying to tell me how to feel, and I don't want someone telling me how to feel because right now I want to feel horrible about what just happened?
And I would say that's perfectly fine. That's your choice.
Mm,
It is. It's individual. I mean, you're a person, you are of sound mind and body. My job isn't to tell you how you feel.
yeah.
Not once will I be like, you sound like that sounds like you're happy. Like, no, because you might not associate happy with how you're feeling. You might not associate angry with how you're feeling.
Mm.
So with being a therapist, we have to make sure that we're not coming from our perspective because if
Oh,
we say, oh, it
yeah.
sounds like, and then if I frame like, well, it sounds like, and you can help me if I'm wrong, but this is what's coming to my mind. See, I open the door like that. Like, so it sounds like, that you're angry? Is that appropriate for me to say to you? Or is there another word?
Mm,
And sometimes they're like, oh no, that's right. Or they're like, no, not angry, frustrated. Great. So to me, it was sounded like anger. Where you're coming from, it was frustration. A therapist's job isn't to tell you what to do or give you advice. Nope, don't do
right.
that. It's like kind of what you said, helping you process and helping you. So I tell all my clients, making connections.
Mm,
We always need to make a connection. Something connects to something. And
right.
once you see that connection, once you see how you operate, because sometimes we don't know how we operate. We
Mm,
really don't. We're
yeah,
just
that's true.
doing it. Everything's automatic. So when in therapy, we kind of slow it down,
Mm.
take it a step back. But yeah, if you want to feel angry and you want to be mad, great. Okay, because I'm meeting you. It sounds great, but because
No, it's good. That's good stuff.
you meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And that's really how I kind of like try to do my life outside of sessions. I meet you where you're at
Mm.
because I don't want to push you someplace where you're not ready to go and you don't have the tools to support where I'm trying to push you. That's not fair because once we're done, I shut my computer and I go about my night.
Yeah.
So it's also making sure that we're not harming in a
Mm.
way. Oh. Hmm.
I'm so glad you said that because I was going to tell you an example for me when
Hmm.
my wife and we were doing, and this is another thing I want to say. I want people to stop doing this thing right now. If you hear someone say they're going to marriage counseling, it's not always because something is wrong.
Right.
It's not always because something is wrong. So stop it, okay? Stop it. All
Cut it
right.
out.
So right, cut it out because that doesn't mean that something is always wrong. Because I feel like in our society, oh, you're going to marriage counseling. Oh, what's wrong with your marriage? Is everything okay? And it's fine to ask because everything is okay, but just don't assume. But anyway, at one point we were in marriage counseling, and I was going to go over this later, but you mentioned it, and I just really want to hit it real quick, where you said that you have to be careful not to bring in your own, your own stuff or your own viewpoints or, you know, that happened to us once, and I called the lady out on it, and because we were working through a problem, but not like something drastic. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
um, I called the lady out on it, and next thing you know, about a week later, I get an email. She's like, "Hey, I'm going to step away for a few minutes, and I'm going to, um, you know, me and my husband are going to do our own, counseling because I told her I said, well, I'm not, in the meeting I said I'm not your husband, and and something must have clicked in her after that. I appreciate her emailing me,
Uh-huh.
but to your point, that could have been very damaging if we were very vulnerable in that situation, because she could have been attacking me, and my wife could have been looking at it like, okay, yeah, she's right, and then that could have been completely damaging. So I 100%, I was gonna get to that later, but you mentioned it, and I just thought, man, that's so good because it's so true.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I appreciate you, um, you know, going over that.
Mhm.
So we talked about some reasons. We talked about there's a lot of reasons for people to seek counseling. So how does someone go about booking a therapist? Like how do you find that match? What should you do if you're looking for a therapist? Because you can look online all day and there's like 1,000 people, but you don't know if that's a match
And it's one of those situations you don't know until you're in it.
till you try
Until
it.
that
Yeah.
sometimes the first initial session, sometimes 4 sessions in, um, it's kind of like when you know, and so
Yeah.
it's. I wish it was easier.
No, you're
Um,
right.
but also, on the flip side of that, it's also the therapist job as well as my job. I'll speak for myself. Where if I feel initially, it's like I might not be a good
Mm,
fit. I think it takes a lot of courage as a therapist to say, you know what, I don't think I'm a good fit for you, and it could be for a plethora of reasons.
yeah.
Um, but it could be things that I'm just not well versed in, and I don't want to do any harm because I don't want to
Hmm.
wing it. Like I learned about this in school, but I'm not too sure about it. I don't want to take someone on just because of that. Um, and the internet, obviously, you can filter what you're looking for,
Mm,
but it's that initial contact. It's that initial first couple of sessions, and sometimes people start off rocky,
yeah.
and then sometimes the rockiness gets smooth.
Mm,
So you kind of have to. You only know when you're in it,
yeah.
but there should be things that a person looks for in a therapist. I mean,
Mm,
do you want someone who looks like you? Do you want someone who looks different? Does gender matter? Does religious background matter? Does education matter? Is it because you can read someone's bio and it's like, oh, they hit all these things that seem like they could help me with. So it just also depends on what is it that you're looking for.
right. No,
Hmm.
I definitely agree with that. Because there's a lot of different stuff, and then there's new language that comes out. You guys are always researching different things in that field, so there's always new stuff coming out. But I agree with you as far as looking at like what they provide. So if I see that you are doing cognitive behavioral therapy and I've been reading about it a little bit, I might say, okay, hey, this person might be a good fit. But I like the example you gave because sometimes you don't want someone who looks like you, sound like you, talk like you, because you might feel like they're going to have the same perspective as you. So maybe you want, and again, going back to what you said, it depends on what you're really looking for out of your
Yep.
therapist, because you may be looking for someone to help you find a solution, or you may be looking for someone to just help you, train your thoughts or gather your thoughts or organize your thoughts. So I think that's really good. One thing I've done a couple things, not that I've been much, but I've done a couple of things. I've used Psychology Today. I've used There's a Christian radio station, New Life. They have a service where you go in and you search for a therapist. You call them. They kind of help you figure. You talk to someone. They tell you what you got. They not tell you what you got, but they kind of talk to you about what's going on, and then they refer you. They give you a list of people that they think will be possibly good for you, and then they give you like $50 off that first session. Actually, they have like some kind of agreement where your first session is free, and then I think, or you pay $50. I can't remember exactly how it's set up, but so there's a lot of ways to find someone. But speaking of cost, this is something I know, but I want to get your perspective. Are there more therapists now offering the use of insurance, or is that kind of fading away a little bit?
I still think insurance is big.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
big. I think there's plus and minuses with that.
Yeah.
Um, Insurance companies, depending on which one you have, they can cover something, they can cover not much of anything. But at least for me, I accept insurance and some self
Good.
pay. Yes. And
Okay.
then even then I mean, I think every therapist does it differently. Some do just straight, private health insurance, some
Hmm.
do more of the public
Okay.
um, side of insurances. But see, even with insurance companies like Kaiser, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna,
Hmm.
Aetna, all of them, it's each of those can get real dicey
Mm.
because we're looking at like that business side of it all.
Right.
So and it's unfortunate because it's like I can't, it's not really the client's connected to it, but then we're connected to the insurance as well because it's
Right.
like, what are you guys doing or what are you not doing?
Yeah.
So that gets a little sticky over there. But I think for the most part, insurance is still big. But I think also private pay is still a thing as well. There's people who will pay out of network, and I have clients who don't want to use their insurance and they'll, do it some other way and because of means and things of that nature.
Hmm.
And it just depends. But yeah, insurance is still king, I would say.
And that's good because now I won't go into it, but the one marriage counselor that we had before, some years ago, she accepted insurance at first and then she stopped accepting it. And I can kind of read, some of your expressions. She was kind of going into some of the insurance stuff and, why she kind of got away from accepting the insurance. But it is a little scary and concern for me because I feel like sometimes the people that need it the most are the people who can't get it because, and this is not a knock.
Oh yeah.
This is just, it's just what it is. Some people charge 150, 175 an hour, and it gets difficult. So it's not something that everyone can do consistently. So having that insurance option to me is like huge. I wish there was some kind of way that they, allotted something to every person who wanted it or needed
Mhm.
the assistance because I think it can do a lot. So I don't know. I was just curious about how you saw how the insurance was nowadays with going to therapy.
Mhm.
So now, say I found a therapist now, I'm going ahead
Mhm.
and I'm talking to this person. How do I know? I know we have, and maybe it's not HIPAA for this. I don't know if this is HIPAA or another thing, but how do I know these conversations are not going to the next person like, oh yeah, hey, yeah, that next person that was just in here that you just saw walk out the door, they did this. Yeah, that person, yeah, that one, that didn't want to look you in your eyes when you walked out. you know.
No, no, no. We don't do that. We don't have like a little round table like so at 3 o'clock. Holy moly. Let me
Right.
tell you what we just talked about. We don't we don't
Right.
do that. We have
Okay.
we have HIPAA and then we're also bound to a code of ethics,
Yeah.
and heaven forbid if a therapist decided to, chit chat and the client for however reason would overhear it, that's a huge no no. I mean, you can lose your license over that. So that I can't do that because I
Right.
wouldn't do that. And I
Right.
think it's just, but see, stuff like that comes with building therapeutic rapport. It comes with building that trust, right?
Hmm.
Because for you to talk to me consistently every week and share things, you have to have a level of trust.
Yeah.
So all the things that we question or maybe clients question initially, the more people can see you for who you are. The
Mm.
client can see you for who you are and vice versa, right? And
Right.
so it's also it's dictating like, look, this is what I can share and this is what I cannot share. So it's really just being clear with,
Mm.
the bounds of confidentiality.
Okay. I got you.
Mhm. Yep.
So, excuse me. So, we cover, do I feel judged? Because people are gonna feel judged when you're talking about something that you usually aren't talking about. You're gonna probably feel judged. Um,
Mhm.
but what tips would you give someone to ensure that they're gonna have a successful session? I mean, we hit on some of those things. Should I go? So, for example, should I go into a session? Should I go into each session and say, this is what I want to talk about? And if we get to talk about it, then we don't, then we do. But if we don't, then we don't. So should I have that level of preparation, or should I just kind of let the conversation flow? And again, I know it goes back to what you're looking for, but I'm speaking just in general.
It's both, honestly, because I actually
Mm,
have clients coming with an agenda. I'm like, these are the points I want to hit, and I already know how they operate, so I'm ready. We can hit those points because that's the box, and that works for them. And I have some clients who start off with, "Yes, the work was really bad today,"
mm,
and then they'll talk about something else, and then something else, and then something else, and be like, "Okay, thank you. This is really helpful."
mm,
Oh, great, because it's what they need in the moment. And I
right,
have but it's always sometimes you don't want to let the session just kind of get away from you because what I try to do and what I often do is try and bring it back to something that I remember from our initial session.
gotcha.
So let's bring it back to this.
Mm,
Because I'm still trying to help you make connections.
right,
And sometimes I'll assign them, I've recommended books for them to help with certain issues that they hit on sometimes because people will hit on things, but then they talk about other stuff. And that shows me, oh, you don't want to talk about that yet.
right.
But I'm remember because I am going to bring it back up
Mm,
because the other thing, it's just being able to, once you feel comfortable and once you know that you have that rapport, we're going to push a little bit more.
mm,
Some people don't want to get underneath the surface with therapy. It's like, oh, I like talking to you. This is great. Awesome. But remember what you told me 3 months ago that you wanted to work on? How about we
right,
just touch on that just a little bit?
right, right.
hmm
So
So
then
every
that's.
client,
Oh,
right?
go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's all. Every client's different. That's all.
Yeah, and I think that's good too because it makes me think. Sometimes I think people, to your point earlier about finding a therapist, I think
Mhm.
people want to go in, one hit wonder. Okay, I talked it out. I'm good. But it's such a process. Like you're talking about those connections. It's such a process. You have to do. I mean, like you said, you have to do at least 3 sessions, in my opinion, to get it right. And even when we were doing, I think one of the best pieces of advice we got during one of our marriage counseling sessions was the therapist that we were seeing suggested that we do individual therapy. And
Mhm.
at first, I'm sitting there thinking like, "What you trying to do over here, man? Like what you trying to do? You trying to
Right.
see if she's gonna be more open while. But it wasn't that at all. And I found there's a guy in Bethesda that I went to, and if he wasn't so far, I probably would have kept going a little longer. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. I would have kept
Mhm.
going longer because just sitting there talking to this guy, talking through not forget the marriage stuff, working on me.
Yes.
It was like working on me, and I'm sitting here and I'm realizing stuff. I'm like, okay, I realized that about myself. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I need to make note of that because some of the stuff that he said to me, like you said, going through that process of how you're thinking, how you're seeing yourself, and all that stuff. Some of the stuff he said to me, I said, man, I never really thought about it like that. It's always been like in my mind somewhere, but I never really saw it like that. So I think that I kind of deviated there a little bit, but I also wanted to make that point about the individual versus if you're couples and you're going through couples therapy. I think individual therapy is I think is great as well. And I think I've actually learned more out of doing the individual for myself that helps me at home
Mhm.
versus trying to do it jointly because an hour is not really a long time. You got two people trying to share opinions and thoughts and feelings in 1 hour. It's really tough, and that's usually what most. I don't know about your practice, but I know usually most therapists like to keep it to an hour so that it doesn't just drag out and you go on and on and on. So I don't really know what the history is on that, but I just know that that's the experience that I've had. Um,
And also, kind of piggybacking on what you said earlier, when
mm,
I meet clients initially, I always let them know you didn't get to a certain point in your life or operate a certain way overnight.
right. Yeah,
So,
that's what he said to me. Actually, that's what he said to me.
but isn't it true though when we really
It
sit
is.
back and oh dang, you're right.
Yep.
I
That's
wake
what he
up like
said.
because we didn't because like I tell my clients, I think I told like two of my clients this today. We're so used to go go go, and we're just
Mm,
operating all willy nilly until something happens or certain situations happen or whatever the case is, things come to a head. And then and I tell them, it's work to undo old ways of operating. It's work to undo old ways of thinking. It is work. And I'm very honest. Like, it's not easy,
yeah.
but it's not impossible.
Right.
That's the thing. But if you buy into it,
Mm-hmm.
it could be helpful. If you buy into it that things can be different, things can change, it could be helpful.
Right.
Hmm.
No, you're right, and to bring that full circle, the point that I also making was sometimes you're just not going to get it in one session. So if someone thinks that you're going to go to a session, one session, and you're going to get it, it's going to be extremely difficult to do that because you only got an hour most times, and you're not going to be able to get everything out. And going back to sticking with that same point, two people in the same room trying to hash out two different opinions on something, it's hard. I mean, you cut your hour in half basically. So I would encourage people to try individually. Again, I don't go out and advertise it, but I have done this before, and it wasn't because I was having like any kind of. I just needed to work through some stuff mentally, and I thought that that was going to be the best way that I could do it. So I just really want to encourage people to
Yeah.
do that. If you desire to do that, or if you think that it's a possibility for you to do that. But going back to the other point, I just don't like the idea of parading around. Hey, here I go. Hey, I'm doing this. I'm like, look, man, that's your private business.
Uh-huh.
It's great to talk about, but don't because like you said, it gets to a point to where you could start making people. You could actually have the opposite effect on people when you're
Yep.
doing that because they're
Yep.
like, oh man, I'm not going to go see it. Well, I can't really pay for that. I need to see it there, and now it becomes for lack of a better way to put it, becomes a fashion statement. Like, oh yeah, I got to go see this person because that's how I get with the cool kids. I'm like, I don't. I personally don't believe everybody has to have therapy. I believe that everyone could benefit
Yeah.
from it, but I don't believe everyone has to have it. And there are people that believe that you have to have it in order to live your life. And I believe that in our current society, there's a lot of things that are introduced in our current society that maybe we didn't deal with 25 years ago, but everyone I don't think everyone has to have it, but I do believe everyone can benefit from it. So the next thing I wanted to ask you though is you kind of hit on this a little bit. Does it matter if the therapist matches my personal faith? Does that matter?
Um, I'm gonna say, speaking for myself,
Mm-hmm.
because I've had clients of different faith that I've worked with very
Right.
well. It's worked out. I think that's gonna be a client thing
Mm-hmm.
because you're gonna have some people want people who get it,
Right.
basically. When you want someone who's the same in some way, it's because like subconsciously or consciously, it's like, oh, they're gonna understand.
Right.
Sometimes people don't want that though.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends. I've had people who are varying degrees of different religious backgrounds, and
Yeah.
somehow it's working because most of the times you realize that doesn't even really come through.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't understand something, I've always asked, can you explain that to me? Like, because now I'm interested. Like, what does that mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if it's ceremony or if it's a way of thinking and doing, like, I ask them, can you explain that to me? I've never heard of that. Or, it's interesting. Like, tell me more about it. So then that way I can, like, put some things in my brain because, we don't know what we don't know, but I'll continue not knowing if I don't ask.
Right.
So it's one of those situations. I think that's going to be a client thing, but it's worked out. I mean, people see people of different backgrounds and everything, and they can mesh.
Yeah, I think when I first, I mean, again, this was a while ago, but when I first started seeking, it was like I have to have someone who's Christian based. But after
Mm.
going through the process, if you're with someone who's professional, they're not going to challenge your faith anyway.
Right.
So really, what I think people should be looking for is, you kind of alluded to it earlier, like, is this person going to understand me? Is this person going to give me the best advice? Because if you go into a session, and we kind of get to this question at the end here, but if you're going to a session and that counselor or therapist is disregarding your faith, then I think you've probably come to the conclusion that maybe you shouldn't be going to that person, even if they don't agree. Um, if they're trying to disregard your faith, it's just not going to work because this is such a core part of you. So I do agree with you. It's definitely client driven. You know, so let's go into this part then. So what if I do book a therapist and it doesn't, and there's some red flags and it doesn't work out? Is it safe? Is it okay to go to this therapist and say, hey, I just don't think this is working out? Um, and you talked about the courage it takes a therapist to tell someone this isn't going to work. And
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that takes courage, because I believe that one of the first marriage counselors my wife and I tried, that person probably should have told us this is
Uh,
not going to work.
yeah.
Now we got some good Cold Stone ice cream out of it because it was right next to a Cold Stone, But that person probably should have said,
Yeah.
um, this is just not going to work. So
Uh,
how do you do that when you're on this side? And I'll only say, I use this term not in a way that some people take it, but you're on the side of submission because you're the one that you're laying out all of your personal stuff to this person, and it's usually one-sided because that's more professional to be one-sided. That person isn't telling you their business; you're telling them your business.
right.
So you're in a very vulnerable state, and not only are you vulnerable, now you're telling this person who, not that anybody sees themselves like this person who's in a position to help you, you're telling them you can't help me. How do you
Mhm.
how do you approach that from the client side?
I mean, I always say be honest, but sometimes it's intimidating, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's kind of like I don't know what happens when we're adults, but I think our inner child comes out when we're faced with like an authority figure or
Yeah.
someone who
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yep.
has an authority. Like we see this with doctors, like or dentists, or whoever else that is we feel is above us in
Right.
some capacity. And so I told clients, if you take away the letters after my name, I'm just Ebony. I'm literally just in my house. I'm just a person who's lived a life and is living a life. You can say all the right things, but there's something inside some clients that they're just like, okay, I'll book with you for next week, and then next week comes and they don't show up,
Mm,
or they'll send an email, which is
yeah.
fine. I always tell people, send me an email. Let me know if at any point this isn't working,
Yeah.
and it's okay,
Mm,
right? I had one client, potential client, we had an intake maybe 2 months ago, and the person was like, this is what I'm looking for my therapist. They need to know this, this, and this. And I said, well, I don't know any of those. He said, so this isn't going to work. And he said, well, we got 45 minutes left, so let's just talk. I
yeah.
said, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And we just talked. He's like, it's a bum that this isn't going to work out. I'm going to have to get someone else at the practice. I said, that's perfectly fine as long as you get someone that you feel like can help you. I don't want to accept someone that I know that I don't hit those certain things
Mm,
because I'm not going to lie. I'm like, oh, yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. That's so unethical and I would
mm,
do more damage, and who wants to lie about
yeah.
that? Because ultimately it's your mental health.
Right.
We don't play with that. So I had one person tell me to my face, like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So,
Right.
okay.
Right.
And sometimes it hurts. It's like, oh, man. But we're human.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, no one, rejection isn't fun, but that's not rejection. This is you not telling me that I can't help you. And
Right.
you're not lying. And what you wanted, I couldn't do.
Mm,
But I always tell clients, just let me know.
yeah.
The more they work with me, they see that I'm very easygoing and easy breezy. And it's, the intimidation factor comes down because now I've seen you for 6 months every week.
Yeah.
And It's not always serious. We laugh. I use humor a lot. That's like my
Mm-hmm.
thing. And it puts people at ease and they feel good. And so I'm like, you know what? And I've had clients tell me after a year, like, I think I got everything I needed to get. And thank you, blah, blah, blah. If I ever need to come back, I will. Awesome. That means that you're done and you don't need me anymore. And that's great because you're in a good place, better than what you were a year ago.
Yeah. No, and
That's great.
I really like that point because more times than not, I've gone into a session and it's been fun. It's not
Hmm.
always tears. It's not always, especially with
Yeah.
the marriage stuff. It's not always, I'm sad and I'm hurt. There are the games. There are the, hey, take this home and play this game like a Family Feud style game, or so there's some fun that can be added into it. Not that we want to make it all about fun, but you're like you said early on, you're not in there at every counselor or therapist. You're not laying on a couch and some person in a suit writing down all of your thoughts and saying, "Yep, yep, yep." It's not like that.
Mhm.
So it's definitely more interactive than I think a lot of people may believe
Yes.
that it is. So how do you break down those generational things where, especially in the African American community, where you can't see a therapist? If you see a therapist, you're crazy.
I know.
We look at all of our. I mean, even look at these athletes. I mean, so many athletes now are on it, but before, I mean, my era where I grew up, athletes, going crazy, as they said, was
Hmm.
something that was like, oh well, this guy can't. When really, if they just had that right person, because if I have something going on, I don't want to go talk to every family member about it, And some people, I'm pretty open with my wife, but some people don't want to go talk to their spouse about it,
Right.
and sometimes the spouse might be offended, which is understandable. But in the same breath, that's kind of a process that you have to understand that this person is really just trying to work through something so that they can be better for you when they come back. Um, but yeah. Um, so I guess with that being said, we'll close on this thought. What do you think the biggest takeaway is for someone? Say there's someone, if you imagine someone right now thinking, I want to go do therapy. Well, first,
Mhm.
before I even end there, are there resources for people who want to have therapy but don't have the resources for therapy? Like, can you go to, people always use this word as a bad word, but it's not a bad word. Can you go to like social services and say, hey, I really want to get counseling, but I don't have the funds? Is there some type of assistance that someone can seek if they want to go therapy, or some kind of subsidiary where they
Mhm.
can go and say, hey, I want to apply for this because I want to see therapy? Are there any programs like that? Or last thing I'll ask about that is, because I think I heard someone say this before, or are there places that people can go, like say one of the days, I think I saw this in Pittsburgh somewhere, maybe when I was in Pittsburgh a few weeks ago, where I think they
Mhm.
had like a mental health thing, but they had like, we're gonna have free therapists here, and you're gonna be able to have a 30-minute session just to kind of see how it feels. Is there anything like that that's general for a person? If someone is watching right now saying, I want to have therapy but I don't have the resources, what can they do?
So I think depending on where you're at, I know at least when I used to work for Montgomery County government, there's the crisis center,
Okay.
and so everyone there is a counselor or social worker or
Hmm.
they fall in, along those lines. So they are readily available. They're 24/7.
Are they
They're
volunteers?
No, they're like staff.
Oh, they're
They're like
staff. Okay.
actual
Okay.
that's there. And I can always email the information and stuff like
Yes,
that.
yes,
Just so
yeah.
you can have that. Um, I know there's pro bono
Mm.
counselors. I think a lot of that's just a quick Google search though, and because I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Okay.
Also, a lot of therapists, some of them offer sliding scale as well. Some of them, accept um, Medicaid as well too. That's also a barrier. Hmm.
Okay. And I
But
see my camera just went out, so
I
um,
did.
I think, but that's okay. We'll finish it here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for doing the interview,
Oh
and
yeah.
I really appreciate it.
I want to talk about a time when I sought help for mental health. So there was a time when I had a 10-month-old baby and a 3-year-old. Their father was suddenly killed in a car accident, and it very much took a toll on me. I had two babies I didn't know what to do with. At this point, the only thing I was thinking of was like driving off a cliff with me and the two kids in the car. I didn't think about anything else. I didn't think about the kids and how that would affect my family. I was just in a very dark place. So what I did was I contacted a therapist. I went to therapy. The first thing they want to do is ask if you want meds, because if you're so suicidal that you can't function day to day, then of course meds is an immediate answer. I tried meds, did not like the way I felt on meds, so I had a therapist. He was very, very good. We were able to talk through things, able to get me back on track, to help me want to live again, I guess, or to help me understand that I had kids and that I had to live for them. And yeah, we just went through a lot. We even tried all kinds of different things. He was there to help me, just figure out what kind of things helped me when I'm feeling down, depressed, stressed. So we did all kind of things from meditation, and we found out that me just walking and clearing my head was one of the major things that helped me. So whenever I get stressed or something, I go take a walk. Even to this day, I go take a walk. So my advice to someone that needs that help, talking out things with someone or venting to someone helps you also think about what you're saying and what you're doing and how it would affect others. So I think therapy is good. It has a lot of negative things behind it. People don't really understand how it helps sometimes, and especially in the Black community, it is a very negative thing. But it helps. It helped me through that tough time. So if therapy helps, and they will help you with different coping skills.